Hi, I'm Jamie Miller, Registered SQF Consultant at Kellerman Consulting, and you're watching the Supplier Approval Program video series. Kellerman Consulting releases weekly training videos and important tips and strategies to help companies keep up to date with the latest food safety regulations. In the last episode, we discussed the different types of suppliers you may encounter and the challenges in assessing manufacturers, co-packers, brokers, and agents that make up your supply chain. In this episode, we will review the regulatory requirements a facility has if they are an FDA-regulated facility or a USDA FSIS facility. It is important to note that food packaging facilities are not regulated by the FDA or FSIS and may not be subject to supply chain controls unless they voluntarily participate in a third-party certification program, such as an ISO 9001 quality management system, or one of the GFSI schemes we will be discussing in episode 7. Regardless of what type of facility we are discussing, the supplier assessments shall be completed and the supplier will be added to the supplier approval list as described in episode 1. Additionally, a review of the food and food packaging safety requirements applicable to this facility shall be conducted to ensure the supplier approval program will be deemed sufficient during regulatory or certification inspections. Please do not rely solely on the information contained in this video series when creating your food safety program. It is important to ensure your food safety program meets all of the specific regulatory requirements associated with the product you are manufacturing and certification schemes that your business has chosen. As we look at FSIS regulated facilities, those processing meat, pork, poultry, and other FSIS regulated items, the supplier approval is a prerequisite safety program, and the HACCP program fulfills all supplier approval requirements. Because the on-site inspector, district supervisors, and enforcement investigations and analysis officer may need to inspect supplier information as part of their normal facility oversight, the information described in the supplier assessment episode is required and should be readily available to present to the FSIS inspectors. Since FSIS conducts more frequent inspections on a routine basis, they are less likely to focus on supplier documentation compared to FDA-regulated facilities where inspections only occur annually or even less frequently. As we discussed in our series on traceability, lot coding information from the suppliers is a required piece of information for all incoming goods, and the FSIS is likely to review the supply chain as part of effectiveness checks for the facility's traceability program. Beyond traceability, FSIS is generally interested in allergen identification for incoming ingredients, letters of guarantee for all food packaging, BSE statements for beef, metal detection statements where metal detection is performed, and testing information such as COAs for incoming meat, poultry, and other ingredients. Lastly, the HACCP team leader, a facility employee who has completed HACCP training through an FSIS-approved training course, must review the supplier approval list regularly and make sure the suppliers are effectively controlling hazards and providing a safe product. As long as FSIS inspectors deem that the facility has control of their suppliers and operates a supplier approval list that is up to date, the facility should be in compliance with regulatory expectations. Any facility required to operate under the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA, is required to include supply chain preventive controls. These facilities include non-meat food facilities inspected by the FDA and facilities inspected by a state or local agency acting on behalf of the FDA. Next, we will look into some of the basics of supply chain preventive control regulations. In contrast to FSIS, FDA and state agencies are generally not in facilities very often. Except for high-risk operations like seafood and low-acid canning facilities, the FDA may enter facilities infrequently, often less than annually. The infrequent inspection frequency of the FDA means that the facilities they license and regulate have a much greater responsibility when it comes to evaluating and monitoring their own suppliers. The FDA, or state inspector, will be looking to see how effective your evaluation or re-evaluation has been since their last visit. As we look at the FSMA regulations, supply chain controls are detailed in Subpart G, or 21 CFR 117.405 through 117.475. These regulations require that the manufacturer understand the food safety requirements of the product and process and evaluate suppliers to determine if their processes include the necessary safety requirements prior to approval. What this means is that the manufacturer must have a comprehensive supplier approval program and may have differing standards for these documents they request from each supplier based on how that ingredient or material is controlled on site. For example, a facility may have a validated oven which kills all bacteria as part of a process preventive control step of baking. A supplier that does not have biological controls as part of their plan for the ingredients they supply may be acceptable, whereas a facility that does not have a validated kill step may deem that same supplier as not safe enough. Now let's take a look at some examples of how supplier preventive controls may be a part of a supplier approval program. The basis of every facility's supply chain preventive controls program is to have a process in place to assess suppliers and maintain a registry of all approved or rejected suppliers. The next step is to identify controls applied by the supplier, especially those applied to high-risk products that will not be controlled at a later step. For example, facilities that receive products such as liquid eggs, powdered eggs, or milk, and for any other food product pasteurized by the supplier, a certificate of analysis should be provided with each lot to document the pasteurization step was successful. Successful application of a control measure applied by the supplier should be documented as a supply chain preventive control in your facility's hazard analysis and risk-based preventive controls plan, and verified with a lot-specific COA. This type of plan is the FDA version of a HACCP plan. Any supply chain preventive controls should be noted in your approved supplier registry. Another example of a common supply chain preventive control is the irradiation of spices. If purchasing and using spices is an integral part of your operation, this should be identified as a supplier preventive control during assessment of the spice supplier. For physical controls, we recommend identifying all suppliers that utilize metal detectors, filters, screens, or X-rays to their materials prior to shipment. These actions can be documented as supplier-applied controls, which may be the difference between whether or not the products you produce will require metal detection. As long as your facility documents those physical controls from the suppliers as preventive controls, and can document that no complaints have been received concerning metal contamination for products processed or handled at your facility, this can be presented as a physical control for the food safety program. To learn more, visit our website and you'll find a full library of food safety training videos and resources. You may also follow us on LinkedIn and click the bell to be notified of new resources as they are released each week.